I clutched the arms of my wheelchair, my eyes wide with disbelief as Trevor's words cut through me like a knife. "You can't even keep the house tidy anymore. You're worthless to me now." "Trevor, what are you saying?" I asked, my voice trembling. He stood there, his expression cold and detached. "I've been thinking for a while now, and it's clear. You can't stay here anymore." My heart sank as I saw the scornful expressions of his mother, Lorraine, and stepdaughter, Erica, glaring down at me. This was the family I had tried so hard to be a part of, the people I had sacrificed so much for, and yet they looked at me like I was nothing more than a burden. It all started a few years ago when I met Trevor at a local community event. He was charming, successful, and seemed like the perfect partner. Little did I know that marrying him meant inheriting a whole lot of baggage in the form of his overbearing mother and his resentful teenage daughter from his first marriage. From the moment I stepped into their lives, Erica made it clear that she didn't want me there. She would leave her dirty clothes strewn around the house, expecting me to pick after her, and then have the audacity to scream at me if I didn't do her laundry to her liking. Lorraine was even worse. She would constantly remind me of how perfect Trevor's first wife was, making snide comments about my cooking or my inability to keep the house as pristine as she would have liked. Despite their constant undermining, I tried my best to create a harmonious family. I would plan outings, cook their favorite meals, and even take on extra freelance editing work to contribute financially. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. Trevor, bless his soul, was oblivious to it all. He would simply brush off my concerns, telling me that I just needed to try harder to fit in. Little did he know that the harder I tried, the more I felt like an outsider in my own home. As I sat there, staring at the three of them, I couldn't help but feel a sense of betrayal. After everything I had done for this family, they were casting me aside like a piece of unwanted garbage. But in that moment, something shifted inside me. I realized that I had been living a lie, trying to please people who would never truly accept me. It was time for me to take back control of my life and find the strength within myself that they had tried so hard to break. With a newfound determination, I looked Trevor straight in the eye and said, "Fine. If that's how you really feel, then I'll go. But mark my words, you haven't seen the last of me." Those first few months after marrying Trevor were a whirlwind of emotions. I was so caught up in the excitement of starting a new chapter in my life that I failed to see the cracks forming beneath the surface. It all started with Erica's hostile behavior towards me. I remember the day she stormed into the laundry room, angrily throwing her school uniform at me. "These needed to be washed and pressed by tomorrow morning," she demanded, her eyes narrowed with contempt. "Erica, I have a lot of work to catch up on tonight," I tried to reason with her. "Can't you put them in the hamper, and I'll get to them in the morning?" "No," she snapped. "I need them done now. That's your job, isn't it?" Before I could respond, Lorraine appeared in the doorway, her lips pursed in disapproval. "Natalie, dear, you really should be more on top of things like this. My Trevor's first wife always had the laundry done promptly." I felt my cheeks flush with embarrassment as Lorraine launched into yet another story about how perfect Trevor's ex-wife was. It was a constant refrain, a not-so-subtle reminder that I would never measure up in her eyes. When I tried to talk to Trevor about it, he simply brushed it off. "They're just adjusting to the new family dynamic," he said dismissively. "You need to try harder to fit in." Try harder? I was already working myself to the bone, juggling my freelance editing work with keeping the household running smoothly. But no matter how much effort I put in, it was never enough for Erica and Lorraine. Their constant criticism and belittling remarks wore me down over time. I started to doubt myself, questioning whether I truly belonged in this family. Was I just fooling myself into thinking I could make this work? The breaking point came during a neighborhood gathering. Lorraine had been boasting about Trevor's accomplishments to a group of her friends when she suddenly turned to me and said, "Of course, Natalie here is just a freelance editor. Nothing too impressive, but at least she tries her best." I felt the weight of every eye on me as my face burned with humiliation. Erica smirked from across the room, clearly reveling in my discomfort. That night, I broke down in tears, confiding in my best friend Jane about the constant struggle I faced. I don't know how much more of this I can take, I sobbed. They make me feel like I'm worthless. Jane listened patiently, offering words of comfort and reassurance. You're not worthless, Natalie, she said firmly. You're a strong, capable woman who deserves to be treated with respect. Her words resonated with me, reminding me of the person I used to be before I let Erica and Lorraine's cruelty chip away at my self-worth. In that moment, I knew something had to change. I couldn't continue living like this, constantly walking on eggshells and being made to feel like an outsider in my own home. As I lay awake that night, my mind raced with possibilities. I had to find a way to reclaim my dignity and stand up to the toxic dynamic that threatened to consume me. And if Trevor wasn't willing to support me, then I would have to take matters into my own hands. After the humiliation I faced at the neighborhood gathering, things only seemed to escalate further at home. Erica's rebellious behavior spiraled out of control, and Lorraine's constant belittling became unbearable. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Erica stormed into the kitchen, her face flushed with anger. "Where's my favorite sweater?" she demanded. "I can't find it anywhere." "I'm not sure, honey," I replied calmly. "Did you check the laundry room?" "Of course I did," she snapped. "You probably lost it or ruined it with your incompetent washing." Before I could respond, Lorraine chimed in from the living room. "Honestly, Natalie, it's no wonder the girl is upset. You can't seem to do anything right around here." I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. "I'll take another look for the sweater after dinner, Erica. I'm sure it'll turn up." "Forget it," she spat. "You're useless." With that, she stormed out of the kitchen, slamming her bedroom door behind her. I stood there, my hands trembling as I fought back tears. How had things spiraled so out of control? I was trying my best, but it never seemed to be enough for them. That night, as I lay awake in bed, I found myself retreating into the world of my writing. It was the only place I felt truly at peace, where I could escape the constant barrage of criticism and belittlement. I poured my heart out onto the pages, documenting the emotional turmoil I was experiencing. The next day, I confided in Jane over coffee, sharing the latest incident with Erica and Lorraine. "I don't know how much more of this I can take," I admitted, my voice wavering. "They make me feel like I'm worthless." Jane listened intently, her brow furrowed with concern. "Natalie, you can't let them break you like this," she said firmly. "You're a strong, talented woman who deserves so much better." Her words resonated with me, reminding me of the person I used to be before I allowed myself to be consumed by their toxic behavior. I had always been a confident, independent woman, but somewhere along the way, I had lost sight of that. "You're right," I said, my resolve strengthening. "I can't keep living like this, constantly walking on eggshells and being made to feel inferior in my own home." Jane reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Then don't," she said simply. "It's time to take a stand and reclaim your power." Her words ignited a spark within me, a determination to no longer be a victim of their cruelty. I knew that I had to find a way to break free from the toxic cycle, even if it meant making difficult choices. Over the next few weeks, I found myself retreating further into my writing, using it as a cathartic release for the emotions I had bottled up for so long. As the words flowed onto the page, I began to see a path forward, a way to reclaim my dignity and expose the truth about the dysfunction that had plagued my marriage. It was a risky move, one that could potentially burn bridges and upend my life as I knew it. But as I sat alone in my study, surrounded by the pages that had become my lifeline, I knew it was a risk I had to take. I couldn't continue living a lie, trapped in a world where I was constantly made to feel small and insignificant. With a newfound sense of purpose, I began to craft my story, weaving together the threads of deception that had been woven around me for far too long. It was time to take back control and show the world the true face of the family that had tried so hard to break me. It was a crisp autumn morning when my life took an unexpected and devastating turn. I was on my way to meet Jane for our weekly coffee date when a reckless driver ran a red light, slamming into the side of my car. The impact was jarring, and the next thing I knew, I was trapped in the crumpled wreckage, pain shooting through my left leg. I cried out, my vision blurring, as I fought to stay conscious. The paramedics arrived quickly, carefully extracting me from the mangled vehicle and rushing me to the hospital. As I lay on the gurney, my mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. How could this have happened? Would I be okay? In the emergency room, the doctors delivered the devastating news. My leg had sustained severe injuries, and there was a possibility I might never walk unaided again. I felt the air leave my lungs as the weight of their words sank in, tears streaming down my face. When Trevor finally arrived, I expected him to be concerned for my well-being, to offer words of comfort and support. Instead, his first question was, "Will she still be able to take care of the household duties?" I stared at him in disbelief, my heart shattering at his callous indifference. In that moment, I realized that to him, I was nothing more than a means to an end. Someone to keep his home in order and cater to his every need. The following days were a blur of pain and emotional turmoil. As I lay in the hospital bed, struggling to come to terms with my new reality, Trevor's true colors became increasingly apparent. During one of his visits, he pulled out a stack of papers and placed them on my tray. "I've been thinking about this for a while," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "With your condition, you're no longer useful to me or the family." I stared at the papers in horror, realizing they were pre-filled divorce documents. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages, my eyes blurring with tears. "You can't be serious," I whispered, my voice cracking. "I'm afraid I am," Trevor replied matter-of-factly. "It's for the best, really. You'll be a burden on us in this state." In that moment, the weight of his betrayal hit me like a ton of bricks. This was the man I had pledged my life to, the one I had sacrificed so much for in the hopes of building a happy family. And now, when I needed him the most, he was casting me aside like a broken toy. As he left the room, I could see the smug satisfaction on Lorraine's face. She had finally gotten what she wanted, me out of their lives for good. And Erica, emboldened by her father's actions, shot me a triumphant smirk, as if to say, "I told you so." In the days that followed, I found myself spiraling into a dark abyss of despair and anger. How could they treat me with such cruelty, such utter disregard for my well-being? After everything I had endured, after all the sacrifices I had made, this was how they repaid me? But as I lay there, staring at the ceiling, a newfound determination began to take root within me. I refused to be a victim any longer. If they wanted to cast me aside like a piece of garbage, then so be it. But I would not go down without a fight. The seeds of revenge had been planted, and I knew that no matter what it took, I would make them pay for their betrayal. They had underestimated my strength, my resilience, and they would soon learn the consequences of their actions. As I was discharged from the hospital, my parents welcomed me back into their home with open arms, offering the love and support I had been so desperately craving. It was there, surrounded by their unwavering kindness, that I began to heal. Not just physically, but emotionally as well. And as I regained my strength, day by day I knew that the time for retribution was drawing near. Trevor and his family had made a grave mistake in underestimating me, and they would soon learn that I was not a woman to be trifled with. Returning to my parents' home was like a soothing balm for my wounded soul. As I settled into the familiar surroundings, the warmth and unconditional love they provided began to slowly heal the deep cracks that had formed within me. My mother, Anna, was a constant source of comfort, tending to my needs with a gentle touch and a listening ear. She never once judged or criticized me for the decisions that had led me down this path. Instead, she offered her unwavering support, reminding me that I was strong and capable of overcoming any obstacle life threw my way. It was during those quiet moments, as I sat in the backyard garden that had been my childhood sanctuary, that I began to reflect on the depths of the betrayal I had endured. The more I thought about it, the more the anger and resentment bubbled to the surface. How could Trevor, the man who had vowed to love and cherish me, discard me so callously? And Lorraine and Erica, who had made it their mission to undermine me at every turn, now reveled in my misfortune, as if it were some twisted victory. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself poring over the memories, dissecting every interaction, every snide remark, every dismissive gesture. It was as if a veil had been lifted, and I could finally see the true toxicity that had been festering within that household. It was during one of my weekly coffee dates with Jane that the seed of an idea began to take root. As I recounted the latest indignity I had suffered at the hands of my former family, Jane listened intently, her brow furrowed in concern. "Natalie," she said, her voice firm yet gentle, "you can't let them get away with this. You need to expose them for who they truly are." At first, the idea seemed daunting, even dangerous, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that Jane was right. I had spent too long living in the shadows, allowing their cruelty to diminish my sense of self-worth. It was time to take a stand and reclaim my power. With Jane's unwavering support and strategic guidance, I began to craft my story, a raw, unflinching account of the emotional abuse and manipulation I had endured. It was a cathartic process, each word a release of the pain and anger that had been festering within me. As the pages filled with the harsh truths of my former life, I found myself growing stronger, more resolute in my determination to seek justice. This was not just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity and ensuring that no one else would ever have to endure the same torment I had faced. With Jane's encouragement, I began to share my story with key figures in the community, people who had once respected and admired Trevor and his family. Their reactions were a mix of shock and outrage as the carefully constructed facade of their perfect household crumbled before their eyes. Word began to spread like wildfire, and soon my story was the talk of the town. I could feel the shift in the air, the way people looked at me with newfound respect and admiration for my courage in speaking out. But it wasn't just about garnering sympathy. It was about holding those who had wronged me accountable for their actions. As the truth came to light, the consequences began to unfold. Trevor's once thriving business began to suffer as clients and associates distanced themselves from him. Lorraine's social standing took a hit as her former friends turned their backs on her. And Erica, once the darling of the neighborhood, found herself ostracized by her peers. It was a bittersweet victory, to be sure. But as I sat in my parents' garden, basking in the warmth of the sun, I knew that I had finally reclaimed the power they had tried so desperately to strip away from me. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I was no longer the meek, downtrodden woman they had tried to break. I was a survivor, a warrior, and I was just getting started. 5 years had passed since I walked away from the toxic environment that had once been my home. In that time, I had rebuilt my life from the ashes, emerging as a strong, resilient woman with a newfound sense of purpose. My memoir, which had started as a cathartic release, quickly gained traction, resonating with countless others who had endured similar struggles. Before long, I found myself in demand as a speaker, sharing my story and advocating for women's rights and empowerment. It was a surreal experience, standing on stage and looking out at the sea of faces, all hanging on my every word. These were people who had once respected and admired Trevor and his family, who had bought into the carefully curated facade of their perfect household. Now they saw the truth, the ugly, twisted reality that had been hidden behind closed doors. And instead of pity or judgment, they offered me their unwavering support, their admiration for the strength it took to break free from such a toxic environment. As my platform grew, so too did the consequences for Trevor, Lorraine, and Erica. Their once pristine reputation began to unravel, fraying at the seams as the harsh light of truth exposed their true colors. It started with whispers in the community, hushed conversations behind cupped hands. Then the whispers grew louder, until they could no longer be ignored. Trevor's business suffered as clients and associates distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with the man who had so callously discarded his wife in her time of need. Lorraine's social standing took a hit as well, her former friends turning their backs on her, disgusted by the revelations of her cruelty and manipulation. And Erica, once the darling of the neighborhood, found herself ostracized by her peers, her rebellious behavior no longer seen as a youthful phase, but a symptom of a much deeper dysfunction. It was during this time of turmoil that they came crawling back to me, their desperation palpable. I remember the day vividly, the sharp rap on my door, echoing through the house like a harbinger of the confrontation to come. When I opened it, there they stood, Trevor, Lorraine, and Erica, their once proud demeanors replaced by a pathetic air of defeat. It was Lorraine who spoke first, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and desperation. "Natalie, We need your help, she said, her eyes darting nervously. Things have been difficult since your little book came out. I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh at the irony of her words. Difficult? You have no idea what true difficulty is. Trevor stepped forward then, his face etched with worry lines that hadn't been there before. Please, Natalie, he pleaded. We're in a bad way financially. Erica's struggling in school, and Lorraine's spending has gotten out of control. We need your support. For a moment I was tempted to take the high road, to offer them a lifeline and prove that I was the bigger person. But then I remembered the pain, the humiliation, the utter disregard they had shown me when I was at my lowest. You're asking for my help? I said, my voice steady and unwavering. After everything you put me through? After casting me aside like a piece of garbage when I needed you the most? Erica opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand, silencing her. No, you don't get to talk. You've had your say, and now it's my turn. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the words I had longed to say for so many years. You made your bed, and now you have to lie in it. I won't be your savior, not after the way you treated me. You're reaping what you've sown, and I won't lift a finger to help you. Their faces fell, a mixture of disbelief and anger etched into their features. But I didn't care. In that moment, I felt a sense of power, of vindication, that I had never experienced before. You underestimated me, I continued, my voice rising with each word. You thought you could break me, but you were wrong. I am stronger than you ever imagined, and I will not let your toxic behavior poison my life any longer. With that, I turned and walked back into my home, closing the door firmly behind me. As I leaned against the solid oak, I could hear their muffled voices on the other side, a cacophony of anger and disbelief. But I didn't care. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free from their manipulation, their cruelty, their oppressive hold over me. I had reclaimed my power, and nothing they could say or do would ever take that away from me again. The aftermath of my confrontation with Trevor, Lorraine, and Erica was like a shockwave rippling through our once idyllic community. As the truth of their actions came to light, the consequences were swift and unforgiving. Trevor's once thriving business took a nosedive as clients and associates distanced themselves from the man who had so callously discarded his wife in her time of need. Contracts were terminated, partnerships dissolved, and before long, he found himself struggling to keep the company afloat. Lorraine's social standing was equally decimated. The women who had once fawned over her at neighborhood gatherings now turned their backs, whispering behind cupped hands about her cruelty and manipulation. Invitations to exclusive events dried up, and she found herself ostracized from the very circles she had once ruled with an iron fist. Even Erica, once the darling of the neighborhood, was not spared the consequences of her actions. Her peers, who had once admired her rebellious streak, now saw it for what it truly was, a symptom of a much deeper dysfunction. She became a pariah, shunned and ridiculed for the role she had played in my mistreatment. As for me, I watched it all unfold with a sense of vindication, a feeling that justice had finally been served. For too long, I had been the one made to feel small and insignificant, forced to endure their cruelty and manipulation in silence. But now the tables had turned. The carefully constructed facade they had built had crumbled, exposing the ugly truth that lay beneath. And as their lives unraveled before their very eyes, I stood tall, emboldened by the knowledge that I had reclaimed my power. It was a bittersweet victory, to be sure. A part of me still felt a twinge of sadness at the thought of what could have been. A happy, loving family, free from the toxicity that had poisoned our relationships. But that dream had died long ago, buried beneath the weight of their betrayal. As the weeks turned into months, the whispers and gossip began to die down, replaced by a newfound respect for the woman who had dared to speak her truth. I became a symbol of resilience, a beacon of hope for others who had endured similar struggles. My memoir, once a cathartic release, had become a rallying cry, inspiring countless others to find their own voices and break free from the chains of emotional abuse and manipulation. And as my platform grew, so too did my sense of purpose. I was no longer content to simply share my story. I wanted to use my newfound influence to effect real change, to advocate for those who had been silenced and marginalized. I began speaking at events, sharing my experiences, and offering guidance to others who found themselves in similar situations. I became a mentor, a confidant, a source of strength for those who had been beaten down by the cruelty of others. And through it all, Jane remained by my side, her unwavering support and strategic guidance helping me navigate the often treacherous waters of public life. She was my rock, my anchor, the one constant in a world that had once been so uncertain. As for Trevor, Lorraine, and Erica, their lives continued to spiral downward, a testament to the consequences of their actions. They had gambled everything on their ability to manipulate and control, and in the end, they had lost. I would be lying if I said I didn't take a certain amount of satisfaction in their downfall. After all, they had brought it upon themselves, sowing the seeds of their own destruction through their cruelty and disregard for others. But as time passed, that satisfaction began to fade, replaced by a sense of closure and a newfound appreciation for the life I had built for myself. I had overcome the greatest challenge of my life, emerging stronger and more resilient than ever before. And as I looked towards the future, I knew that my journey was far from over. There were still battles to be fought, injustices to be righted, and voices to be amplified. But for the first time in my life, I felt truly empowered, ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. Because in the end, I had proven that no matter how dark the night may seem, the light of truth and resilience will always find a way to shine through. The years that followed my confrontation with Trevor, Lorraine, and Erica were a whirlwind of personal growth and self-discovery. As the dust settled on that chapter of my life, I found myself embracing a newfound sense of purpose and determination. My memoir had struck a chord with countless others who had endured similar struggles, and before long, I was inundated with requests to share my story on a larger stage. What had started as a cathartic release had blossomed into a platform for advocacy and empowerment. I began speaking at events, sharing my experiences, and offering guidance to those who found themselves trapped in toxic relationships or oppressive family dynamics. It was a humbling experience to see the impact my words could have on others, to witness the spark of hope ignite in their eyes as they realized they were not alone. Through it all, Jane remained my steadfast companion, offering her unwavering support and strategic guidance as I navigated the often treacherous waters of public life. She was my rock, my confidant, and I knew that without her, I would never have found the strength to stand tall in the face of adversity. As my influence grew, so too did my commitment to effecting real change. I became involved in various women's rights organizations, using my voice to amplify the stories of those who had been silenced for far too long. It was during this time that I received a call from Jane, her voice brimming with pride and a sense of closure. "Natalie," she said, "do you remember when we first started this journey? When you were at your lowest point and the idea of seeking justice seemed like a distant dream?" I smiled, nodding even though she couldn't see me. "Of course I do. It feels like a lifetime ago." "Well, look at you now," she continued. "You've become a beacon of hope for so many others, a living embodiment of resilience and strength. I'm so proud of the woman you've become." Her words filled me with a warmth that radiated from the depths of my soul. To have come so far, to have overcome such adversity, and emerged not only unbroken but stronger than ever before, it was a testament to the power of the human spirit. In the years that followed, I continued to pour my energy into my advocacy work, using my platform to shine a light on the often overlooked struggles of women in marginalized communities. But through it all, I never lost sight of the journey that had brought me to this point. It was on a crisp autumn day, the leaves painting the world in vibrant hues of red and gold, that I found myself standing before the graves of my parents. As I traced the weathered letters of their names with my fingertips, a sense of peace washed over me. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice carrying on the gentle breeze. "Thank you for giving me the strength to persevere, for being the unwavering pillars of support that I so desperately needed." In that moment, I knew that my journey had come full circle. I had faced the darkest depths of despair and emerged victorious, my spirit forged in the fires of adversity. And as I looked towards the future, I felt a sense of purpose and determination that burned brighter than ever before. There were still battles to be fought, injustices to be righted, and voices to be amplified. But I knew that I was ready, armed with the knowledge that I had already overcome the greatest challenge of my life. As I turned and walked away from the graves, the autumn sun casting a warm glow upon my face, I couldn't help but smile. For in that moment, I realized that my story was not one of revenge or bitterness, but of resilience and triumph. I had reclaimed my power, my dignity, and my sense of self-worth, and in doing so I had become a beacon of hope for others, a living embodiment of the truth that no matter how dark the night may seem, the light of perseverance will always find a way to shine through.